Thank you for tuning in to the Island Treasures podcast. We value the insights shared by our guests and host, but it's important to note that their personal experiences are intended to inform and encourage, and not to replace professional, legal, or medical advice. With that, we are ready for today's exciting episode. Welcome to Island Treasures mini podcast for caregivers. This episode is brought to you by alongside Caregiver Consulting. And I am your host and caregiver consultant, Alison Van Schie from beautiful Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. In the full episode featuring Alexis Baker, we learn how music therapy can be a bridge for caregivers and their loved ones by incorporating music in the day-to-day of dementia caregiving. Let's hear from Alexis what music therapy is.
So music therapy is a very formal practice, and it involves assessment and treatment planning and evaluation, documentation, all of that, where we are actually working on goals and objectives. We're working towards improvement in certain areas. We assess the needs of the client and really create goals targeted to address those needs through music.
We can use music and music therapy as a support system when caregiving for a loved one living with dementia. And Alexis wrote about that in the Caregivers Advocate, a resource book for caregivers. Hear more about the chapter Alexis wrote and how useful music can be.
It's a book full of support and resources for caregivers called the Caregivers Advocate. And 21 chapters, 21 authors. We each contributed one chapter. And I wrote a chapter on incorporating music into the day-to-day of dementia caregiving. It's all about sparking joy and creating connections through music and using music as a support system, in a sense, really using music as a go-to tool. It can be great for redirection with challenging behaviors. It can be great for transitions throughout the day. And then it can be great for as the main focal point of an activity, like really just focusing on the music in and of itself, whether that's just listening to a song, and then if it leads to some reminiscence, just kind of sitting in that space. So I offer 7 very practical ways to use music: listening, playing, singing, recording music, and a few other ways, and just really like practical tips of the how-to, because a lot of people can be intimidated by if especially if they don't consider themselves a musician. If they do consider themselves a musician, then maybe they're more comfortable with it. But if you're not, then it can be a little intimidating. Like, where do I start? What do I do? How, like, I don't even know. So just putting some practical tips in their hands.
Don't worry if you don't consider yourself musical. There are those of us who may not be musically inclined. Like my husband, for instance. Whenever he's asked if he can play a musical instrument, he quips, "Sure I can. I can play the stereo." All joking aside, I believe he too would benefit from exploring music in the way that Alexis explained. So how do we access a music therapist to gain these benefits when caregiving?
2 issues I wanted to address with my program is there's not enough music therapists serving people with dementia, and it can be very cost prohibitive. So we offer a high quality alternative to formal music therapy that's highly accessible and highly affordable. We're able, because of the model and nature of our program, we're able to keep it super low cost, and that gives them access to hours upon hours of video content.
Yeah, that's a solution, a valuable solution. And you don't have any travel costs for
Yes.
yourself, which is awesome. And they don't have any restrictions of what time they access your program. So that's really cool too. I see that as a win-win.
Yes, I was just going to say, I was trying to think of a solution that's a win-win-win all around.
Talk about a win-win-win. I encourage you to consider exploring the realm of music therapy as an alternative caregiving tool. By incorporating music into each day, you can create meaningful connections with your loved ones and enhance both your lives. Let music be the bridge that brings you closer together. If you're in the midst of your own caregiving journey and need some supports, I invite you to tap into alongsidecaregiverconsulting.ca. If you'd like more information from Alexis, check out her website, bridgetownmt.com. I recognize how precious your time is, especially as caregivers, and so this mini podcast is designed just for you. And when you have more time, I invite you to listen to the full episode called Music is a Bridge for Caregivers and Their Loved Ones, to hear more from Alexis on music therapy as it pertains to caregiving. Thanks for listening to this podcast or watching the mini version on YouTube. Be sure to click the link in the show notes if you have any questions or comments, and they'll be addressed in a future podcast episode. Take care.